Welcome back to another episode of Growth Support. My name is Neil, and I had the pleasure of welcoming back Marybeth Alexander, the CEO of KnowledgeOwl, back for another conversation. Last time we talked about building your first help center, and we're changing it up this time to talk about creating a people-first culture and balancing business needs from her view as a founder. Let's get into it. So welcome back. It's been a while.
I'm so excited to be here. It's been too long.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. A lot has happened in the meantime.
Oh man, when was the last time we met?
Sometime September last year, I think.
I mean, bar none, the biggest thing is that KnowledgeOwl is now a certified B Corp, which was a big goal. Big goal for us. We started working on it in May of 2020, so it took a while, but we did it.
Yeah, few years in the making. What all does that entail?
It's a lot. So to be a certified B Corp, they have what's called a B Impact Assessment, which is sort of like a framework you can go through. It's just a bunch of questions you answer about your company and organization. They ask for documentation. It's a free tool. Anybody can use it. So it's pretty fun just to use to see like, how are we doing? But to be a B Corp, you need to have a score of 80 plus, which is not that easy. And it needs to be validated by B Corp. So once you actually get your assessment and you get to that score, you can pay some money and submit and say like, yes, we're ready. And then you get audited. Then they make sure that you're actually walking the walk, and they check all the documentation. They meet with you, they talk to you, and make sure your score stays above 80. And if you do, you can be a B Corp too.
I love it. So it's pretty much like the people version of like ISO security, something like this, really making sure that
it's a very similar thing. So like I do a lot of security assessments because companies come to us and like, it's very, we're concerned. So we've gone through a lot of different security frameworks and like answered all the questions. It's very similar to that, except you get a score. I mean, you get a score at the end, right? So it's not just answering the questions. It's also like trying to like find out, okay, we answered it this way. It's similar to a security assessment. Like I remember back in the day when KnowledgeOwl was just a little company and we'd answer security questions. You'd be like, I'd really like to be able to say yes to that, but we don't do that. So then it would go on the list of like, we should really do that thing. And I remember one of the big things that happened in the security assessment was there was a question about, they're like, do you back up your entire thing to two different places? Like, and I was like, we back it up, but it's all in the same place. And then I was like, well, what happens if something happens in Virginia? What happens if Virginia is just offline? I was like, where's our backup? So then I couldn't sleep at night because I was like, what? We don't have backups in the second place. So I was very proud the day we had backups in two different geographic locations, because we know if something happens to Virginia, we're still okay.
Nice.
Even though that's probably unlikely that it would. But it is very similar as you go through the assessment. But this is really about how you run your business. So it talks about the people aspect. So like how you treat your like staff and your employees, how you treat your customers, how you treat the environment, like what your governance is like as an organization. So you go through all of these different styles of questionnaire, because the big thing about B Corps is that profit's not the only bottom line, right? It's like people and planet. So a lot of people call them triple bottom line businesses, is that people that balance profit with people and the planet, the 3 Ps, if you will.
Yeah.
So this is a way to sort of validate that companies are doing this, that they're not greenwashing things or just, paying a bunch of money to get rated as one of the top places to work, right? Because you can do that too. This actually makes sure that you are doing the things that, the group that does this, the B Lab group has decided these are the benchmarks and these are the things that the most progressive companies are doing. And are you doing it too? So yeah, it's very similar.
Nice. And it really focuses on the people aspect as well. One of the 3 Ps you mentioned.
Very much people.
What does KnowledgeOwl do to lead people first? And what does being people first mean to you?
So this is like a newer term. Like I don't remember ever hearing people first until like the last like year or so, but like that phrase has become pretty big. Like there's like people first jobs, which I'm a huge fan of. And like you hear like people have it in their taglines, like I'm a people first marketer. And I love it because we didn't have that language before and I didn't know what to call it. Is like when I first started KnowledgeOwl, was like, what resonated with me was like the old Google tagline. Do you remember what the old Google tagline was? Don't be evil. right? Like that was their whole thing. Like, don't be evil. And I was like, yeah, that's good. You shouldn't be evil because a lot of businesses are evil. So like, don't be evil because like maybe I didn't have positive feelings about capitalism. So like old school, like Google was like, don't be evil. And that sounded pretty good. Then they dropped it, which was very concerning. Right.
Like, I mean, you turned it around on a positive note, right? Your tagline is business can be a force for good.
I do like that. That is actually, I think maybe like it got planted in my brain from B Corp because they actually say like that was like a tagline B Corp used at one point. So like I don't know if I picked it up from them at some point, but I loved that phrase. Like business can be a force for good. So like what it means for people and for me as like a business owner or like when I was a manager of a support team, like it was always people first. Like one of the big ideas that I've always resonated with, like, is like, I believe, like, I love great customer service. Like, it's always sort of like, I love treating people well. I love giving people a great experience. And I think customer service oftentimes has like that sort of like negative vibe. Like people don't value it. People think customer service is like, like calling somebody up and getting stuck in a phone tree, right? And having to argue with somebody. Like customer service has always, culturally been sort of like a lower totem pole job.
Speak to your manager, please.
It makes me mad because I think like great service, like these people are amazing, right? They're like, they're taking care of you and they like actually care about you as a human. So like, whether it was, like I was a teacher, I was a manager of a support team, I started a business. It was, if you want people to give great customer service, which we know, like, I think people just intuitively know that if you want to like have a great business, a great company, like you need to treat your customers well. Like this is not rocket surgery, right? Like this. We all know this, but yet people don't pay customer service people well. People understaff customer service. People don't value it or create career paths in it. And like it's hard to keep people there. But I think at the end of the day, if you want to have great customer service, like you need to give great customer service to the staff, right? I think it's something I heard very early on. It was like, this makes total sense. Treat your people well, they'll treat your customers well. Again, not a mind-blowing observation, but why do so many companies not do that? That's right? So I think it starts at home. It's like, treat your people well, they'll treat your customers well. Because like I don't think your staff is ever going to give better service to your customers than you're giving to them. Right. So like whether like, you being generous, you being like kind, you like caring and taking time and like giving them time and autonomy, right, to do things and make decisions, like empowering them. I think like those smaller things, right? Like you take care of your people, you'll take care of your customers. I don't know. It's always made sense to me. And now we have like a word for that. It's like people first, like take care of people first, they'll take care of the rest of the thing. Right? Like we're humans before we're anything else. And like all a business is like a collection of humans, like interacting with other humans. And like, that's the important part. Like to me, money has always been secondary, but like, I'm not a money driven person. So like, I've always been like, oh, there's like types of companies that like don't care about profit as a bottom line. Sign me up. Because it felt better, right?
Yeah.
It felt better as a business owner.
So, I mean, as a business owner and managing the collective people first and giving back to the business, I'm always a little bit curious of people who really, really are full 100% people first, which I think is an amazing way to go. How do you find the balance between that and ensuring business sustainability as an organization and performance management around that?
It's hard. I think just like, I'm sure you talk about this, you talk to support folks a lot. There is the idea of martyrdom, right? Is that like we give so much and we don't take enough time for ourselves, right? And support, like we don't like self-care, right? Like you're just like, we need to help people. There's so many people to help. Like I can't leave right now. There's still like tickets in the queue, right? This person needs this thing by Friday and like, I want to help them. So I feel like that I saw it happen in support. And then I saw it happen in my people first company is that unless you are very intentional about like taking time for yourself, you can get out of whack really fast. Like one of the examples I will tell people about with my company is I wanted to take care of everybody. So for many years, like I was the lowest paid person in the company. And you will see this with like tons of different startups. And a lot of times it's just out of necessity. It's like people want to grow so that they hire other people and they give themselves a smaller salary because at the end of the day, right, like they're going to cash out on the company and they're like investing in the future. That was never my goal. Like it was never to like sell and make a lot of money. Like my exit plan is to become an employee owned company, right? Which is not the payday that a lot of like startups have. Like I would like to figure out a way to transfer ownership to the collective and the people that work on the software. So like money was never the driver, but at the same time, it's like, well, I don't need that much money. So why would I pay myself more? I'm fine. But like I would pay other people more, right? And so it's hard, right? Because like the other thing that, we did early on, and I talk about this too, when I've talked about like the 25-hour work week, is like our team members decided like 25 hours is good. Like I can work and then I have other time for other pursuits in my life. And that's a good balance. And we pay people what they asked to be paid. So like people would be getting paid for 25 hours what they needed to live, right? And so like they were working 25 hours, they were making what they needed to make. And like, for like myself, it's like I'm making less and I'm working more, which it can lead to some bad, like a little bit of resentment, a little bit of bad feelings. It's like, why is everybody else benefiting more from my company than me? But like, who did I have to blame for that? Was like myself, right? Like I could just pay myself more. I could just work 25 hours too. So like, it was very much on me. But these same sort of ideas is like, you take care of other people. Like, are you actually taking care of yourself at the same time? Yeah. And I think they'll tell you when you like start a business is like, pay yourself first, right? Take care of yourself. Because while you might think you're doing something altruistic by working more, paying yourself less, in reality, you're a risk. Because if something were to happen to me and they need to go hire somebody, they're not going to be able to hire somebody for like what I paid myself before, right? So like, it's like you're creating like other problems by not, necessarily taking care of you and like treating it just like a business, right? Like I've heard this before in a very negative way, as people will say, like, we're not running a charity here. And I've heard that phrase used in negative consequences, but at the same time, I think a lot of people, especially a lot of people who are people first, like have negative ideas about money. Like they have negative beliefs about money. I'm definitely in that camp and I'm definitely working through them. And part of my personal vision, like I have the idea that like talking about money is not emotional, right? And it's just straightforward. It's just a fact of life. And I'm working through that. Like this is like a work in progress for me. But I think to run a successful people first company, you need to make sure that you have money in the bank to continue running it. Like money is key, right? Yeah. Like you can't.
At the end of the day, you also need it to run the org.
Right. If you want to do more good in the world, you need money to do it. You need to fund that. Right. So like it needs to be sustainable. We talk about sustainability a lot when it comes to the environment, but sustainability is also like in terms of money, right? Like you can't spend more money than you make for a long period of time. Like that does not work out. Right. Like, so it's like learning to balance the need and the want to do good with like actually like having like a sound financial system, like I don't know what to call it, like a baseline.
Yeah.
Right.
You need this to be consistent and safe, and then what you do in order to give back and to be reaching the standards of being a B Corp across the P3 essentially.
Yes.
And it's very, very important.
The 3P.
I'm still curious. I saw you talking about the 25-hour work week, and I saw that one of your colleagues and team members was working on some paintings, and I never saw the results.
Oh, Erica. Oh, yeah. So I can send you a link and we can put that in the show notes too. She's incredible. She's incredible. So like, yeah, she has her own studio. She has her own website. She does a bunch of shows. So like, she's legit, right? Like, I think she has like 2 shows on right now. Nice. She's in a little town in Canada called Moncton in New Brunswick, but she might be moving at some point, but she's in Moncton right now in Canada. But yeah, they're amazing.
And do you find that when people have time to be able to do their passion and to be able to follow that when they do show up, they're more motivated to work for example, for KnowledgeOwl and for the things that you're working on at work? Or is that just to pay the bills and run the mill?
No, I think it's 1000%. I think it works for yourself too. I don't know if you've had this experience, but like sometimes when you have a deadline, this is why procrastinators like do well with procrastination, when they have like a finite amount of time to do something and they can get it done. It's the stress of like having too much time. So there's some sort of law. I don't remember which law it is, but that any work will expand to fill the time you give it. Like, I think it's a very true thing, right? Like
it's the same thing with goldfish growing.
Like you're just, so like when you put parameters around something, when you say like, I am only going to work 25 hours, right? Like I'm only giving myself, 3 hours to do this project. right, you suddenly have to make decisions, right? You don't have like an unlimited amount of time. You need to be like, what is the best thing I can get done in this amount of time? Like, what's the 80-20? Like, how do I get the most value for my time right now? And I think people are more focused with it, right? Because you're not just waiting out the clock, right? You're not just like, okay, I have like 5 hours left, but like, I don't really feel like doing anything. So maybe I'll just go wander around the office and talk to people, which is delightful. I did love wandering around.
Get a coffee, a little water cooler.
Play some ping pong. Maybe there's a beanbag chair and some video games, which is good. That's the great thing about being a manager, though, is like that's actually like work sometimes. Is like just going around and hanging out with folks and like talking to them as humans. So what are the upsides of being a manager?
Speaking of being a manager, I have a question around, of course, for this purpose, we're always trying to share best practices and maybe learnings as well. Being in and owning a people first company, you have full control over the culture that you create within your company. Would you have any advice for anyone who is maybe a manager or not an owner to be able to create a people first culture within their team when not is a full people first culture in their company?
1000%. Like this I think was my life at my last company, because there was definitely a point where the entire company was very people first, right? And like in support involved, right? Like in support too. Like we were all going the same thing. And eventually the company sort of like shifted a little bit and was like, we're going to grow, we're going to do this stuff. And I was like, yeah, but what about all the good warm fuzzy things about like taking care of folks and great customer service, right? Like what about that? But it didn't matter because like it was my team, right? Like we still continued operating under those same like ideas. So I've seen this happen at many organizations where you might have like an amazing like support team or a development team with like a great culture, but like other teams might not have a good culture, right? So like I don't think it helps when you have like top-down support from management, but like you can create whatever type of culture you want. Like you can create whatever type of environment. And I don't think necessarily the culture is only you, but it definitely starts with you. And it can definitely be influenced by those outside teams and people and like business owners, but it's the people you hire, right? It's like the way like you spend your days and like how you structure your team. So like, I mean, in terms of like advice for that is like, it's a good question. Like it seems very natural to me. And I think sometimes a lot of the people first stuff to me is just obvious. Like, why wouldn't you do that? Like, why wouldn't you take care of folks? But like, why
like it's just a straightforward kind of thing,
right? Like, I'm like, why? It's very obvious, but it's maybe not as much when you don't have support and like you're given numbers and you're told to hit targets, right? Or you like adopting a team, especially when you get hired into a role and like suddenly you have all of these people. But I think one of the biggest things like that I'm on board with, and this is just like company wide, is the idea of like one-on-ones, like really doing one-on-ones and not doing it like checking off the box, like how are things going at work? Great, blah, blah, blah. You stuck on anything? No. But like really, really like genuinely like getting to know everybody on your team and like spending time with them. Right. And I think like making your one-on-ones sometimes like not about necessarily the work, like sure it's good to talk about work, but like understanding like the whole person and taking time and spending time with them. Like I'm a big fan, if you are in person, about like taking walks with people or going for walks or going for field trips, like taking somebody out to lunch, going out to breakfast, going to a rodeo. I don't know. So like one of the things I really like to do for reviews when I used to like was in person managing a team is I would let people pick what they wanted to do for their review. Like, and I had a company card, we'd pay for it. So like people would just choose like, oh, I want to go to this restaurant or I want to go on a hike or I want to go to a rodeo, right? Like they would like choose like what they wanted to do. Like it was a fun thing. It was like their birthday, right? Which a lot of times like a review is, it's like, you've been here a year or you've been here 6 months, right? Like it's sort of like your birthday. So I think spending the time to like treat individuals well, like I think is bar none the best thing you can do for a culture. Right? Yeah, like that is like your baseline, in terms of that. But yeah, and I think it also sort of like depends on your style, right? Like of like how like what sort of like culture like you want to have and like what sort of things you want to do. But we were just talking about, right, like I think before we started we talked about like how we have like a we have a group of people who are learning Spanish at KnowledgeOwl, and you have people who are learning Dutch at your company, right? Like, and it's like this extracurricular thing that you can do, but like you just do it. You support people in doing those things. And I think supporting people and creating those like sort of like microcosms or like, you know, mini groups within there, like I think that is really good for culture, is like letting people build relationships with each other and supporting people to take time during work to have like human connections, and not forcing everybody to be chained to their desk or their computer all day. Is really giving them like ways to enrich not just their professional skills, but also like their personal life skills.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's always like interesting to me. You mentioned like being in the office versus not being in the office. Like especially in the office, for example, like perception is super important, and like visibility in terms of like other people and other departments might not know your culture or know your team specifically, but they see it. And so what you externally do, so for example, like I always try and have fun, have an energetic environment wherever we're at. But then at the same time, you get that maybe observation or something randomly comes in and says, "Hey, it doesn't look like you guys are really working." So I was like, yeah, I mean, we are. We're also just making it lively and keeping things engaged. Like it's a fine balance, I would say, that you have to roll with a little bit.
Yeah, and eventually things like that might get shut down. So like my old team, like they were support heroes. So like everybody has their hero persona, and I still like keep that. Like we still do that at KnowledgeOwl, but like in my old team, it was like, okay, you come on, you're a support hero. What do you want your identity to be? Do you want to be like a sheriff? I was a goddess. Like we had people who were like mermaids and sorceresses, and like people would have their own identity. And like we fully encourage people to like decorate their space. So like everybody had like themed office, like themed cubicles or themed things, and there was tons of toys, you know, finger rockets, Nerf guns, with the whole 9 yards, right? Like it, sometimes you would walk into support and be like, what is happening here? Because it looks like way too much fun. But I think in order to like give that level of service, right? Like that was like the way for people to like not take it so seriously and to have more fun with the customers and with each other, and to deal with like stressful situation and like balance it out. But yeah, so like when people would come through, people were either like, oh my gosh, I want to work here. Like, how do I get a job here? Because this looks so much fun. Or people were like, this is so unprofessional. Like, what are you doing? And
it's one or the other.
It was so fun. Like we had so much fun. Like I think it was equally probably the most stressful like I've ever had at work, but it was also like probably the most fun I've ever had at work. And eventually like new owners came in, new management, and they're like, they cut out the fun names. They're like, you're an account manager or you're technical support. Like we're professionals here. We're not going to like sign off as, you know, with silly names. And that makes me really sad because people really liked it.
I still remember my support experience that I got from a VPN company, and they had very specific personas as well. As Tunnel Bear, they had like their support reps were like Glitter Bear or Metal Bear Solid and things like that, and they had their own little sign-offs and everything. I think it's fun. I think it's engaging. Like from a customer experience, it also depends on the image that you create as a company as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's silly, but it's also very human, and it gives you something to connect with, right? Like, I don't know. We still do it at KnowledgeOwl. If you go to our About Us page, you can scroll through and see what everybody's titles are, and it's still something people notice and they take time to comment on and engage with us on. And like some of our customers will give themselves their own titles when they talk to us. I love the ability to like have fun with folks, because I mean, you know, life is hard. There's a lot of difficulty and struggle, and like being able to have fun, like I think is just a big quality. So like that's the thing about people first, right? Like you can be super caring, but like part of it is like having good energy, and like sometimes that's fun, and so like everybody's fun looks a little bit different, so it's hard to say like have fun, because fun is different to different folks. But to create those like really like positive like energy experiences internally and with other folks, like I think it goes a long way. People feel that energy and people relate to it, whether it's like your new team members or people walking to the office or the customers interacting with you. If you are having a good time and you are like feeling good and feeling positive about like what you're doing and how your day is going, the people you're surrounded by, like people can feel that, right? And like it can spread positivity. And I think one of the biggest things is, you know, while, none of our software is like, all of our softwares are maybe like changing the world or doing like, groundbreaking things, like it might not seem super important, but like whatever is happening is important to that person who is contacting you, is important to what's going on in their lives. And like you have the opportunity to like make that person's day better and like to spread positivity, which you don't know like what that will do. Like, well, that like a small act of kindness to like one other person will do like exponentially into the world. And I think support teams in particular have like this like gift and opportunity to like spread positive impact, not just directly to the people they're interacting with, but to their teams and to their families. And, the small things you do can have a big impact. So I think like building a people first thing is not just about making life better for like the direct people. It has this indirect positive impact on the rest of the world.
Definitely. It's that huge butterfly effect that you don't necessarily know what that impact is going to have on somebody. You can see somebody at their best time or their worst time, and you have a chance to affect that and change it.
Yeah.
You're talking about culture and a people first culture. And I mean, culture doesn't necessarily come down to just the fun and just the like pizza parties and things like that. Culture is a lot deeper and more widespread than that, especially when it comes to people principles as well. Is there anything specific that you think about when you're looking at a people first organization for yourself outside of just culture when it comes to putting it into practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of like policies and procedures that are either like people first or they're not, right? Like how you actually do business. And I think a lot of it comes down to like treating people with respect and like giving them autonomy to like make their own decisions. So like, are your policies as like, as a company, like for your staff members, or are your like procedures for your team, like, do they respect the people as individuals or the customers as individuals to like make their own decisions? So like, you think about like policies, right? And like, is this in the best interest of all people, right? Because there's a lot of policies that are in the best interest of the company, but they're not necessarily in the best interest of the customer. And sometimes there are policies that are in the best interest of the customer, but they're not necessarily in the best interest of the team, right? Like, going with like the customer is always right. And like, you've seen it where like managers will let customers be abusive to members of their team and not step in to help them out, which is not a people first policy, right? Like necessarily. So I think like looking at those little things you do every day, like with that lens of like, is this supporting people, right? Like, because I think you can balance it. Like something could like, especially when you think about like refund policies or when you put limits on like levels of a support, like, or how much you're going to help a customer with something. Like there's all sorts of like different aspects of your job and like trying to figure out the balance between like, is this good for, profit, like the 3 Ps, like going back to that, like, is this supporting the business? Is this supporting the people in the business, both the customers and like the staff members? And like oftentimes, like depending on what industry you're in, like how is this for the planet? Because like, there's a lot of decisions that like it could be good for one area, but not good for the other. So you're trying to create those sort of like win-win situations. And like, I firmly believe if you can find those areas where it's a positive benefit for everyone and you can find the win-win-win, like that's where you need to be like trying to aim for all the time, is like looking through that lens, is like making decisions that are not just good for people, but are good for the business and are good for the planet.
I definitely agree. I'm of the personal belief that as a support leader specifically, you always have to keep 3 things in mind whenever you're creating or trying to really drive change or engagement or be successful in general. 1, being customer centric and creating an amazing customer and valuable customer experience. Number 2, having an engaged and high performing team in terms of that people first engagement and creating a culture that thrives. And then number 3, that business side of it, really trying to be able to drive business outcomes and being able to help. So these 3 things in combination, if you can find that win-win-win, like you mentioned, it's how you can be successful. If you keep them in mind, you can build for the 3 of them as well.
Yeah.
Nice. I love it. Thank you so much. I think it's very interesting to see the difference of perspective from somebody who is very like business driven oriented and very people first oriented, and being able to see the kind of blend that you have as well. It's always interesting to hear that perspective.
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because I think I was definitely on the support perspective, even as a business owner, like it was always what's best for people, right? Like years and years of this, right? Which doesn't scale. Like you need to focus on the other aspects. So for me, it was very it was very obvious. Like I said earlier, like I just wouldn't even think not to be a people first company. But
Yeah.
also, in order to be a company, you need to focus on your other piece too. Like, you need to make sure that you're focusing on like the business side of things and balancing like the people aspects of them. So like I definitely came at it from like an interesting perspective. And I think a lot of companies are like, okay, we're like doing well as a business. Like, how do we like do better for people?
Yeah.
And I think that is, you can come at it from either way, but it's going to be a struggle either way, because, you know, like anything you focus on, like everything is time and money, right? So like what's that balance between taking care of people and taking care of the business, or taking care of the business but also taking care of people? Like how do you make sure that they stay in sync, and then you don't create a situation where things are out of whack, right? Like we did it in the opposite way, where like we are taking care of people like super well, but like maybe the business like itself like
We
we
should
need to spend some
probably
time on.
focus on that so that we can take care of
Yeah,
the
so that we can continue doing this, but like maybe we need to like stop here for a second and like let the business catch back up to like all the things we're doing for people. I think a lot of businesses are on the reverse. Is they're like they've gotten here and then they're like, yeah, but we should also like we're doing really well, but like what about all these people? Like we should like take them with us. But yeah, it takes like that aspect of it really like takes like a leader who is like willing to like stake their claim in the ground and be like no, we need to do this, right? Because it's going to cost money, right? It costs time and money to do those things and to be people first, and you know, being willing to like go to bat for people and like speak up like when things aren't right and you like need to do something. But like I think that's the cool part of like being a manager and being in a leadership role on a team, is being able to like fight for your team, right? And like fight for your customers and fight for the people aspect of it, or fight for like the planet aspect of it. Like if you see problems or you see like where you're being wasteful and you could be better, it's like fighting for those things. Even though like at the end of the day, like it might not necessarily drive profit, but like it is the right thing to do and will eventually like maybe short term, like you might lose money on it, but like long term it pays dividends because it makes your people happier, right? Those internal people, it makes your customers happy, and like happy customers and happy people will stay and like help you grow your business.
I love it. I really, really do. For just putting a pause in it, for people who are listening to this and not watching it, I'm just going to say, I love that in every single one of our conversations, you've done some sort of hand graph and like really visual element with how you approach showing what you're talking about visually. I absolutely love it.
I'm a little animated. Yes. I forget sometimes you're listening to things. I was just actually talking to somebody because they were, you know, we were talking about being on video, and like for the first like probably like 3 or 4 years of KnowledgeOwl, even though we were remote, like I did not turn my camera on. I was like anti-camera for years and years and years. And like I would just wander around and I would be doing the same thing, like having these conversations. And I always thought that I could connect really well with people without actually seeing them. Like I'm like, why do we need cameras? Like, why do we need to see? Turns out a lot of people like to see faces. So I learned this as a leader, is like I turn my camera on, and now my camera's on by default. And I don't think people would ever know this about me, but like I was very anti-camera for years and years and years.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always a funny thing finding the balance, like especially in a very digital environment. Thank you, Marybeth, for sharing your perspective and you know, your thoughts on what it takes to lead a people first business. And I think it's really, really interesting. And I think as a baseline, a lot of it is people, if you take care of them, will help you to grow and be better and be able to help you sustain your business in the long term. It's an investment, and it's definitely well worth it. Last time I didn't get to ask you this question, but I've been ending all of the podcast episodes with this question. What would be one thing that you've learned over the course of your career that you still live by today?
Stumper. I should have known this was coming. I'm listening to other episodes. I might have to get back to you on this. Like I'm like totally drawing a blank because I can only think of like silly things. Right, like silly things, right? But yeah,
perfect way to end it. What's a silly thing?
What? I don't know, but I mean, like, I guess maybe this is a more serious thing. This actually made me think of this from like the camera conversation, but not everybody is like the same. And like I think we intuitively know this, but we forget sometimes. Like some people like want to see your face, and like to them that is their way that they like connect with you and like want to do this. For some people they just might want to stay off camera because that's stressful for them. And like there's not a one size fits all, right? Like again, very silly things is like one of my silly things that popped in my head is like people love stickers, right? Like when I was a teacher, I would give out stickers. People love stickers. Like when I had to implement like timesheets for my support team, I'm like, I gave out stickers for filling out your timesheet, and people love stickers. Well, most people. Some people don't like stickers. So like learning that like not everyone is the same and learning to treat people individually, I think is like the greatest sort of like support skill you can learn is to like find out like what each individual human wants. And yes, you can like learn about most people or like generally this works, but like learning to assess somebody's individual like wants and needs and desires and then being able to treat them like they want to be treated. There's your platinum rule is like you just keep going back to that. Is not everyone's the same, and you need to the best type of service is and like interactions with other humans is treating people like they want to be treated.
Spoken like a true people first leader. There you go.
There you go.
I love
everybody loves stickers. No. Asterisks, they don't. Not everybody loves stickers.
Asterisks, fine print. Actually,
not actually. No, some people have a fear of stickers. Like who knew? There you go.
Who knew? Well, thank you so much for joining me again. I really appreciate the conversation, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.